Welcome back to Travels with Geordie. I'm home and it's just gorgeous here in Victoria. And I don't even have time to blink and I gotta get going because we're gonna take MV Zephyrus out cruising this coming weekend. We're gonna go to the Campbell Bay Music Festival in Maine Island, which is one of the Southern Gulf Islands. Only about an 8-hour steam from here. But Zephyrus isn't actually quite ready for major sea steaming yet. There's a few little things I have to do, like finish the wiring and actually quite a bit more. So let's get to it because we only have a couple of days. Alright, so good morning, back aboard Zephyrus. Holy moly, we got a lot to do. You can see down there next to Geordie we have 3 of the batteries, 3 more of them here, and we're going to pack them down into the engine room of Zephyrus. I'll tell you more about that. Zephyrus had this monster for the start battery, as well as this older Hart interface inverter, which works. It's a charge inverter. It's early, but it works. We're going to reuse it. So just figuring out a tray for a new start battery. There's lots to do. We'll get into it. We're going cruising in like 3 days, so I got to get on this. Okay? Well, I don't know if you can see it, but there's this rather decent battery tray in here already. It's got a ledger on the aft end, bulkhead forward. It's the right depth, in other words 10 inches for the batteries, and it has stops at both ends, which unfortunately are 1.5 inches too short. So I have to take the stops out and put some new stops in. So I'm going to take the oscillating tool and cut those bolts out of there. Okay, so I got the 2 end stops out. All the oscillating tool work in the world. Couldn't cut the screws. I just pulled them out with a hammer. Okay, so now I got to build new stops so the batteries don't slide back and forth, and I don't have a lot of plywood to hang on to, but we'll work it out. So I need to make up 1.5 inches. These heavy end stops I'm going to replace with much smaller 3/4 inch mahogany and screw them in with these 2-inch screws, 6 in each, because I'm going into slightly old but marine plywood, and I want to make sure that if the boat really starts to roll, there's no way batteries are going to move. In time there'll also be a ratchet strap over the top just to be sure. So I'm just going to countersink all of these. Now I'm doing these at an angle so that not only will it be easier to screw the screws in up against the side of the battery, but it'll also bite into the plywood even further in, increasing my chances for a solid connection. Okay. So I'm going to put the port side one on in advance, set all the batteries in, and then put the starboard side one in to snug it in. Okay, this is not a comfortable place to get to drive these screws, but I will avoid cursing. You know what I need to do? I need to learn to curse in Danish, like Mads. And then no one but a few select people will even know what I'm saying. Good. You don't need to watch. I'm telling you, if you're going to move these batteries at all, buy yourself one of the handles. Makes life a lot easier. There we go. Whew. I like that. I like that a lot. Easy to get at, easy to service. Perfect. Okay, so I've decided not to use this big old 8D as the start battery. We have 2 more deep cycle 6-volt golf carts. I'm going to bring them in and make a small battery tray for them right underneath here. And this thing will run my boat at the dock for the meantime. Yeah, kind of ugly and pretty freaking heavy to move. Alright, so I've lugged the massive 4D back and put it in my build, and I've brought back these 2 more 6-volt will become the start battery on MV Zephyrus. And I've cut a piece of 3/4 inch marine ply and ledgered it up. I haven't screwed it down. That will go and become the base for it. I'm actually really pleased. Easy access to service them and check the levels. Nice short cables to all the battery switches, which are going to be right there. Actually, I'm super pleased with this. I have to put some fiddles on the plate for it so that they don't slide around, and screw it all down. We're almost there. So here's the battery tray for the 2 start batteries. Basically a piece of 3/4 inch marine ply and some Sapella mahogany fiddles. And I just wanted to do a test fit, and now I'll put a bunch more screws in and we'll put it in place. I absolutely love it. Just perfect. Really easy access. Perfect. Now, as all these are 6-volt batteries, basically I'm taking this pair and turning them into a single 12-volt battery as the engine battery, start battery. So this jumper from positive to negative turns this positive and this negative into a 12-volt battery. And in here I pair the first 2, the middle 2, and the last 2. And here's the pairing cables that turn them into 12-volt batteries. And then I bridge the 12-volt positive and the negative, and I'll take the main tap off here and here to go up through the fuse to the battery switch. Not quite sure where I'm going to put the fuses yet. Perhaps in the console, perhaps right there. I have to think about that. You want easy access to them, but the console's getting pretty full, the helm, whatever you want to call it. Well, welcome to this morning's $675 box of toys. Rewiring boats, not cheap. The first toys on the list will be the new battery switches, and trying to figure out where to locate them. This is by far the easiest place to set them up. I'm going to recess them. They'd be kind of elegant here, but the steering cable is pretty close behind here. They'd be really elegant there, but the helm control cables are right there. You can see where they come down there. So all of this is kind of not a safe place to put anything. The problem with putting them here is that they're going to stick out the back a fair ways and create a bit of a restriction in all the wires that are coming up and down in here. Of course, you're appalled by the current state of the wiring. Yes, we ran the wires, but the boat is running off a lot of morettes and only a couple of circuits. That's what I'm here to fix. All right. So we got the appropriate hole saw. It may be a 1/16 too big, but I think that'll be just fine. Now I just need to figure out where I want these to be. I think they'll just be side by side, centered in the panel, really as high as is practical. Yeah, right about there somewhere. 3 inches down. Half a 19 is 9.5. Come over 3, about there. Good. I'm going to pre-drill, as I always do, with just the pilot, because when you have the big hole saw on, it is hard to be sure you're exactly in the right place and it can walk easily. So I always pre-drill. Excellent. Nice. I like it. With the 2 switches in, I should explain the logic as to how I'm setting up the switches. Basically, a boat has a house battery bank, and that's the battery bank that looks after all the things domestic in the boat. The lighting, certainly the inverter is the biggest thing, other kinds of water pumps, etc. And it has a start battery bank, which is only used to start the engine. The idea being, if you stay up late, you leave the fridge on and lots of lights on, the boat will still start in the morning on its own dedicated battery. So that's cool. So really, you need to be able to disconnect, or at least I feel, you need to be able to disconnect all the batteries from everything at any time. So basically, this will be the house battery switch, and this will be the start battery switch. So if these are up and in their off position, there is no power getting from the batteries. There's no chance of a short or whatever, and I can do some work, or I can leave the boat or whatever. There's one exception, and that's bilge pumps. Bilge pumps need to always be on, but we'll get into that another time. So the reason I've set up both switches as combining switches, in other words, 1 or 2, generally what I'll do is I'll have the house battery switch to bank 2, which is the house bank, the start circuit switch to bank 1, which is the starter battery. But if something were to go wrong, the starter battery died, it wouldn't start in the morning for some strange reason, I can always just switch the engine to the house bank and start it up on the house bank. Likewise, if something went wrong, there was some reason I wanted to switch the house bank to the starter battery, I can do that. So with these 2 switches set up 1 and 2, I can put either the house load or the start load on the house or the start battery. The other thing I can do is I can combine them, which means, let's say both sets of batteries are just barely there and I need everything to get the motor started some morning, I can combine them. And there's other reasons I might want to do that too. Maybe running the windlass for a long time, or it's hard to say. Combining them is not ideal because, of course, they're different types of battery banks and they'll fight each other a little bit, but in a pinch, that might be something you'd want to do. So this gives me total flexibility, always able to decide how I'm going to set up the batteries. You know, before I go any further, I would love to just take this temporary wiring all apart so I have a nice clean place to work. The only problem with that is that nothing will work from that point on. So I have to be able to finish, or at least do another more elegant temporary set of wiring before we go cruising in a couple of days. The AC side, it looks ugly, but it's at least wired the way that it's designed to be wired, because there is a common and a ground bus right on the panel. That's not the way I'm going to do it. I don't like these wires coming around the corner like that. The DC side, I actually only have one other breaker that's in there that's handling the entire thing. I won't need this battery charger anymore, so I think I'll pull it all out, or at least tuck it down, and redo it circuit by circuit, or something. I really wonder if this is a good idea. Well, a blank canvas. You can see by the thousands of holes and little screw evidence or whatever, there's been several generations of wiring in this boat, and I think you saw how hideous the previous one was. So, starting from scratch. So, let's work from the top to bottom. What I'm going to do, I'm going to put two small bus bars right at the top. One positive, thus the shielding, and one negative, and they will be ignition on live. So they will feed all the lights for the gauges and all the power to the gauges. So any of the things that are in the instrument panel that need power when you turn the ignition on. And so that'll work pretty well. That'll keep all that nice and high. Next thing down will be two basically terminal strips, giving me 24 banks. They'll come straight across right below it, and all the switches and gauges will feed into those. And I'll have them all marked off so I know what they all are. So there's no wires hanging down. So at any time if I need to replace a switch or a gauge or whatever, I'm not chasing wires all through the boat. They'll end right here. Yes, it seems like a lot of extra terminals, but it's neat and tidy. I think so. Anyway, then coming in from the left will be all the DC circuits. So all the DC circuits will basically pop in like this, coming from the side, and they will start with a ground. So the first, well, it won't be this, it'll be this puppy. So that will be on standoff. So in other words, it'll be held about 3/16 to 1/4 of an inch off the surface. So what'll happen is the ground will be used up first, and the positive wire will pass underneath it. So that'll go there. All the circuits will be here. The ground goes right onto this. So we've used up one wire right away. We only have a single wire after that. Then two more terminal strips will be here, also on standoffs. Well, the last one won't be. So this one will be basically the switched circuits. The circuits like things like the horn or the wipers, things that aren't always live, will come to here and then go up to their switch, corresponding switch. The circuits that are live all the time will come underneath that one. Things like lighting, etc., will come right to this bus bar, which will basically be the power. Now this power bus bar will also feed up to the switches for the things that are switched. Horn, wipers, things like that. So basically after these two terminal strips, after the one at the top, there'll be three in a row this way. Then, not done yet, not even close, two more larger bus bars. These is the main AC, main 12 volt, thus insulated, down here somewhere. So that gets the battery cable to it. This is after the fuse and after the switch. So this will be the house system, positive, negative. And they'll be sitting about here. Now, beyond that, we switch to AC. AC gets a little more complicated. I think my terminals are up here. The AC circuits, here's a good example of one. An AC circuit has ground, neutral, and hot. So they're all going to come in from the left, like the DC circuits, a little further down. So the ground will go straight to the ground bus bar. So that'll go straight onto that. The other two wires will come under. Then the neutral will come to a neutral bus bar, which will be right beside it. It'll pop up. So we've dealt with two of the three wires in a few inches. So only the black will still need to be switched. It will go to a small bus, to a small terminal strip like this, which will then send those 6 wires to the 6 breakers on the panel. So we won't have all those wires pouring over onto this. I'm not going to use these 2 bus bars on the actual breaker panel. Just too many wires over here. So we'll take 6 wires off of there, up, through, and down. Now, I do have to feed the original hot, neutral, and load to the 2 main breakers at the top, because on a boat, when you turn off the main breakers, you're turning off both, I don't know if you can see that, both the neutral and the hot. So I have to make sure I'm turning off the neutral and the hot before they go back to the bus bars. Too much information right now, I'm sure. And then, about here down, I should be able to have room. I'm really hoping to be able to put, if I can find it, I've lost it anyway, the 2 main fuses, so that I have access to them in this little hatch here. And they are the main fuses, one for the house and one for the start, corresponding to the 2 battery switches. And all the heavy battery switch wire will be down here. Now, there's another main switch I'm going to put on. I'm going to have a cutout switch for the windlass. Gosh forbid something goes wrong with it, and it'll have its own fuse. I'll find a place to get in there. And there's so many like irregular things, like for instance all the other wiring. In the case, this is the fuel gauges that comes into this opening door. So there's a lot of things that don't fit that system, but I'm gonna get started and see how it all comes together. Right? Well, I'm in the forecastle of Zephyrus, just forward of the helm and the panel where I'm doing the work. And I'm setting up to put the inverter up in this corner, because this section here will become a hanging locker at some point, so that top corner won't be all that valuable. But what I have to do first, there had been some work, I can't even open it again. A relatively reputable boatyard here in Victoria did some work to this boat, and they added this panel, and they put this cover panel to hide all the wiring that was in here, which I've removed almost all of. The only thing I can't get to is some wiring for the windlass, which is actually jammed in between this plywood and the old bulkhead. Anyway, it just, I'm a little disappointed in the way they sort of prettied it up in here. But anyway, I've got to dig this all apart, and I have to take this bunk out to do it. Just a bit of work. After some unscrewing and some bashing and smashing, I've got the bunk out, but this extra piece of bulkhead goes down below this, which is seriously, I more bashing and smashing. Finally got all this crap off of here, and so I can easily get this stuff out and pull it through and abandon this whole section. There'll be no wires through here. What's really shocking is this is the fuse for the windlass, which was in a completely inserviceable location. I'm going to stop ranting about it now, but that was just horrendous. I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but this is super crucial. In fact, it's one of the most important things about wiring with these Anchor crimp and shrink tube terminals. And that's often the plastic shrink tube is too close to the ring of the terminal. So if you look in this case on this one, it is so close that the head of the screw, and I don't know if you can see that, actually is sitting on the plastic and not on the ring. So when I tighten this up, not only will the plastic be jammed in between the screw and whatever fixture I'm screwing it to, tightening it and tightening and tightening it will not help, because you're just going to squeeze that plastic out thinner and thinner, and you'll never get a good connection. And it may make contact and something may work for a while, but you'll have a fraction of the contact surface that's required to carry the current that this is rated for, and well, you'll have a fire, or it'll certainly get pretty hot. So you have to take these terminals, if you find this, if you're at all suspecting of this, I'm trying to do this with one hand here, and take an Olfa blade or whatever your tool of choice is after it's shrunk and bonded, and cut back just enough of that shrink tube so that you're sure when the screw goes through the hole, it's fully mated onto the ring terminal and not catching the insulation of the shrink tube. And that is just, it's shocking that all the major brands, Anchor and a couple of the other ones, all have this problem. So be careful. Welcome to Beer of the Week. This week we're aboard Zephyrus back in Victoria. It's good to be back. Aboard Zephyrus because you've just watched the first part of the rewiring of the console and a bunch of other things. There's going to be 2 weeks of that, I'm afraid, because there was so much footage I couldn't get it into 1 week. However, in real time, we head off cruising in the morning. Everything is done and buttoned up. So pleased. So, Beer of the Week. This week, as I was traveling, I was so missing my favorite brewery, Driftwood Brewery, and this is their Black Stone Porter, which I've never had, and I've been sort of looking forward to, even though I'm not really a porter drinker. You know, I'm questioning about porters and stouts generally, but because it's Driftwood, I'm looking forward to giving it a try. Let's see what we think of this. It's going to be dark. Oh, it is nice and dark. Pouring a bit fast there. I am tired, I'll tell you. Okay, well there we go. Let's see what we think of that. Oh, yummy, rich. Well, if there was ever a porter to convert me to being a porter drinker, that is yummy. And it's not coffee or chocolate or any kind of imitation flavor. It's just a rich beer. It's like a super dark beer. I love it. I really love it. I'll be drinking more of this. Well, that gives me an opportunity to do a couple little bits of housekeeping. Really excited about this. Got a little package in the mail the other day, and I think I know what it is, but let's open it together because I think it's going to be pretty cool. Came from New Zealand. Whoa. Whoa. Piece of wood, and on the other side of it, MV Geordie. Is that gorgeous? Yes, my goodness it is. Well, let me fill you in a little bit about where this came from. Yeah, so a while back I got an email from a very kind fellow, Barry Batosi in New Zealand, and he asked me if I would like a plaque with MV Geordie on it, and I absolutely adore it. Thanks so much, Barry. It's a wonderful treat. I just love it. And while I'm cheersing, I should also send out a cheers and a thank you to Peter Crane, this week's new patron. And thank you so much, Peter. First new patron in 6 weeks, so I'm very, very grateful. Cheers to you, Peter. And that about does Beer of the Week for this week. We head off cruising tomorrow. We'll get some great footage and maybe fly the drone. See you next week.